Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for all that you have provided us and our blessings, the freedom and liberty that we so richly enjoy. Thank you for the right to gather this evening as a community and to have our voices heard. Please give us your strength, guidance, and wisdom in our deliberations this evening. And we pray for those recovering from the disaster in Texas and Florida. In your Son's name, amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Planning update, announcements.
Thank you. Just wanted to bring your attention to an item that was in your packet. It is a community meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at Salem Baptist Church, located at 4044 Plank Road. And the topic of the community meeting is a proposed rezoning application for the development of an age-restricted residential single-family attached community located in the Cortland District at 5715 Ross Drive. That's my only announcement.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is review and approval of the minutes of September 6, 2017. Our machines aren't working this evening, so I will take a roll call vote. If there are no questions or comments on the minutes, I'll take a motion.
To approve.
Second.
We have a second. Mr. Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Carter. Ms. Carter, I'm sorry.
Hey, buddy. Aye.
My apologies. Mr. Bullock.
Aye.
And Mr. News votes aye. And happy birthday, by the way. Moving on to the next.
Wait on the side, I think.
The IT department here tonight?
Thank you.
Okay. We don't have any unfinished business, so we'll move on to the public hearing, rezoning case R17-0009.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Floor computer, please. This is a somewhat unique request. The property in question currently has no zoning designation. It is part of a larger tract of land that was part of a rezoning several years ago, Crossroads Station. It's part of a larger mixed-use area. The property, the larger portion of the property is zoned Industrial 1, and adjacent to this property is the Virginia Railway Express Station and maintenance yard. And they are in contract negotiations to purchase additional land to expand their maintenance facility. And during those negotiations, it was discovered that a portion of this larger property had no zoning designation. And what occurred was that this used to be part of the railroad right-of-way. And back in the 1990s, there were several deed transfers that occurred, and when a portion of this right-of-way was vacated, it left this 4.77 acres with no zoning classification. So this 4.77 acres is part of a total of 19.5 acres that the VRE would like to acquire to accommodate the expansion of their maintenance facility. So that's why we're here this evening. Staff is recommending approval of the zoning request to Industrial 1. Here is a zoning map, and I've highlighted here at the bottom. This is the 4.77 acres that has no zoning classification that once was part of the railroad right-of-way. And you can see the VRE parcel is right here. And this is part of the larger area of the whole tax map number here that has a few different zoning classifications. One is the MU5 from Crossroads Station. There's a portion that's zoned RU, and then this larger section that's Industrial 1. And this portion of the property has historically been zoned Industrial 1. Here's an aerial of the site. This is the generalized development plan that was provided. The darker shaded blue area is currently the VRE's property. This lighter shaded area is the 19.5 acres that they are going to acquire to allow for their expansion. And this hatched area is the portion that has no zoning classification, which is subject to the request this evening. The property is adjacent to a number of residential properties here along this side. And as part of the site plan that's currently under approval now with staff, it's been on hold until this can be rectified. But as part of the requirements, a transitional screening 3 will be required along this property line that's adjacent to those residential uses. A transitional screening 3 is a landscaped buffer 50 feet in width.
Excuse me. The lighter blue is already industrial 1.
Yes, sir.
It's the darker blue that would.
And the darker blue is as well. It's just this hatched area that has no zoning classification.
Okay, thank you.
The industrial 1 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use designation of employment center for this area. It also supports the business retention goals that are identified in the comprehensive plan. The proposed zoning will provide a zoning classification to an existing unzoned area. The findings against is that this proposed zoning will allow existing industrial use to expand closer to those residential properties. Now, I will say that the closest residential property to this area to be rezoned or to be zoned industrial 1 is 320 feet away. And one could make the argument that, you know, having this rezoning is triggering those transitional screening requirements with the site plan, whereas if it was still VDOT right-of-way or railroad right-of-way, those requirements wouldn't be in place. So with that, staff does recommend approval with the findings in favor, and this zoning is essentially just going to fix a gap in the zoning map that exists today. The applicant is here to answer any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions for Kim? We'll hear from the applicant, if they have a presentation. If not, we'll go right into the public hearing. Okay. Okay, thank you. Anybody sign up for, did you take a sign-up sheet? Okay. I'll go over the rules here for both the applications we have tonight. When you come up to the podium, there's a box. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. When the light turns yellow, you'll have 1 minute. When it's red, I would ask that you wrap up your comments. When you come up, please state your name and address. And if you are speaking for a group, you will be allowed 5 minutes. With that, if there's anybody that wishes to address the Planning Commission, feel free to come on up. Okay, we will close the public hearing portion of this. Any other questions or comments at this point? With that, I will take a motion on the application.
Make a motion for approval.
Second. We have a second on it. Again, I will do a roll call vote. Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Carter?
Thank you, sir. Aye.
Mr. Bullock?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll move on to special use permit SUP 16-0013, Milestone Communications.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Patrick White with the Spotsylvania Planning Department. This case, SUP 1613, is for a telecommunication tower in the Chancellor Voting District. I have a few prepared remarks and a PowerPoint presentation for you. The applicants are Milestone Communications along with T-Mobile. The applicant Milestone is requesting a special use permit to place a 150-foot tall monopole communication tower with a 6-foot lightning rod within a 2,590-foot fenced equipment area on a 13.46 acre parcel which is addressed as 11100 Gordon Road. That is the Chancellor substation. The proposed tower is going to be just south of that substation, and I'll show you a few images shortly. Staff presented this case to the Cable Television and Telecommunication Commission last week, and the application was recommended for approval by a 4-0 vote. The proposed tower is, the site and the tower, they're approximately 1,700 feet southwest and behind the Salem Fields Community Church. The Salem Fields Community Church, as you're already aware, is at the southwest corner of the intersection of Gordon Road and Salem Fields Boulevard. The proposed tower is approximately 660 feet north of the residential of the nearest house. That nearest house being in the neighborhood of the called Nye River Landing to the south. A recently approved assisted living facility will be built approximately 500 feet to the east of this site. That's east-northeast. The property is improved with an electrical substation. It is zoned RU or rural and has a future land use designation of institutional per our comp plan. The proposed tower is pictured on the left. Again, it's 156 feet high and situated just south of the existing substation, which is depicted with this black circle where my mouse is at the center of the red circle. The tower is designed to fold in half in the event of a catastrophic damage, with the upper portion buckling over and remaining connected to the lower half. This design results in a potential 88-foot fall zone, which could potentially intrude into the air rights of the neighboring Salem Village Community Church, which owns property to the south. Accordingly, a waiver is required to Code 23-7A 4.1.2. Staff requested that the acknowledgement of the intrusion and the support of the case from the church be documented in writing. That has been received by staff and is within your packet. Due to the proposed tower's location, a waiver is also required to Code 23-7A 4.1.6, which requires a 15-foot landscaping buffer, as not enough room is present to accommodate that. 18 trees will be removed through the course of this, if this is proposed, and the applicant has proposed 21 evergreens to be replanted in the south and some additional fill-in plantings to the north. On the image before you, I've depicted that fall zone in red, and that green line there depicted is the property line. As I mentioned earlier, the first equipment on the proposed tower is for T-Mobile. 2 different signals will be broadcast from that equipment, a mid-band and a heavy band. Our consultant, as well as the applicants, are here if you'd like to discuss these technical things a little further. But pursuant to county policy, the applicant provided propagation maps for each of these bands. On screen is the current plot of signal strength for the mid-band signal, which is depicted the site itself with that little red circle. And if the tower is proposed, this map shows the improvement. This next map shows the current signal of the heavy band bandwidth frequency, again with the red circle depicting the site, and this map showing the improvement if the tower is improved. A balloon was flown on the site on November 17th and 18th of 2016 in accordance with county policy. These next few slides are simulations, photographic simulations of the tower. This image is looking down the utility corridor to the north near the Nye River Landing community. You can easily see the tower, the existing communication tower within the Chancellor substation, the transmission lines, and even the substation itself. This image is from further within the neighborhood, looking more to the northeast. The tower becomes a little harder to see due to some existing vegetation, but still visible above the tree line. This photo, deeper within the neighborhood, again, the tower is visible above the tree line. This photo is taken from the Nye River Community Church, with the tower readily visible. And further east across Gordon Road, the tower remains visible, though barely, just above the tree line. Spotsylvania County routinely engages as an expert on the wireless industry, George Condilis with Atlantic Technology Consulting Incorporated, to provide assistance on technical matters based on his expertise and years in the field. During the review of this case, staff received notification from the neighboring Nye River Landing HOA that they would prefer a monopine/tree pole style tower be used to have the tower better blend in with their community. The county has another monopine tower at the Zoan Church on Route 3 that you've probably seen. Staff relayed this information to the applicant, and they redesigned the tower according to the HOA's requests. However, after the change, staff referred those materials to our expert, and we were informed that a tree pole tower would pose a considerable safety concern here. The branches of tree poles are made of fiberglass, and the needles are wrapped metal, much like an artificial Christmas tree in your home. Because of this design, the proximity to the substation and the transmission power lines, the monopine design was strongly advised against by our consultant. The safety concern was also noted by Dominion Power staff. A copy of their letter is in your packet. County staff then asked that the tower be relocated elsewhere or reverted back to the monopole design for safety purposes. Our consultant noted that a distance of 200 feet should be maintained from any tree pole to a substation or transmission line, which cannot be met anywhere on site except for the northwest corner, which is heavily wooded. Staff reviewed this case and found that the proposal will increase the T-Mobile signal and provides room for 4 additional co-locators, including county emergency communication facilities if needed. The tower will accompany an existing communications tower within the substation itself, and the high-tension electrical lines and transmission lines in this area. The HOA's request to stealth the tower was evaluated, but not an acceptable option at the present location for safety reasons. And an alternative location on site appears to be an option, but would entail significant engineering and forestry loss. The tower is not required to be lit. It was determined to have no adverse direct nor visual impact on historic resources. The tower met the SUP standards of review and was in general compliance with the comp plan as noted within your report. Lastly, the 2 modifications that would be required to the existing telecom codes to allow this tower to fit in its present location. The property that's most impacted by this case has been supportive of the church, supportive of the project. That would be the Salem Fields Community Church. I also reached out with the developer of the assisted living facility to the northeast. Mr. Smith indicated he'd prefer it be stealth, but wouldn't quote unquote kill the deal without it due to the existing equipment already there. Staff's recommending approval of the tower with the conditions within your staff report, generally summarized as compliance with the GDP, that the new trees planted south of the substation must be 4 feet high at planting, that county equipment co-location provision, general compliance with county codes, and an interference resolution condition.
What does that mean?
That means basically that what the condition says is that the applicant will work with the county to resolve any potential interference if some occurs.
What type of interference?
Interference with the county's communication system.
Has the county, the authorities, the experts in the county commented on that? Is that a problem here?
No, it's a standard condition.
Okay. The
applicant did get in touch with us today. They were concerned with condition 3 regarding the county co-location condition. The applicant, myself, our IT director, worked today to revise that condition to something that they could support more. However, that condition hasn't been approved by our county attorney's office. It could change a little bit more. It's lengthy, and I will not read it for you, but I have displayed it on your screen should you choose to do so. Basically, we have this condition appear in other wireless proposals to allow the county to locate emergency equipment on a cell tower site. It's typically done so for free. The applicants wanted to better define and limit how much equipment could go there. Our IT director is comfortable with the condition, and I believe the applicant will say that they are comfortable with it as well, as I do understand that they were. But again, it could change before we take it to the board because the county attorney may have some changes to it. Staff's recommending a motion. The motion might be to recommend approval with staff's conditions, including the revised condition 3. I know that the applicants have a presentation which may resolve some unanswered questions. I would welcome any shortly, but I did want to note that I also received some correspondence. I received an email of objection by one property owner in the Nye River Village to the south, and another email that didn't expressly say that she objected, but I'm fairly confident that she does. She also noted some concern over the not getting a mail, a piece of county mail. She was not an abutting property owner. That's why she didn't get one. I did get to talk to her today via email, but not by voice. However, in her email, she did ask that because she couldn't attend tonight, that the matter be tabled. That is up to you how you would like to proceed, but I did not see her in the audience tonight.
I read through the package, and I'm wondering, I can't understand from the site plan what the offset is of the tower from the transmission lines.
That is depicted in your GDP with an exhibit, a little insert here.
I'm looking at it, but I don't see the dimension.
The nearest power line is noted to be approximately 78 feet away. There's also, that's one to the east, but there are also lines running east to west. I'm looking at sheet number Z10. If you look at it from that perspective, then appears to be an existing line at about 40 feet away. So they're fairly close.
So if the expert is recommending 200 feet to have a camouflage monopole, is there not room to move the proposed location to accommodate that?
There's no room to slide the tower east or west along the south side of the property. I'm looking at page Z1. The only opportunity would be to...
But why not?
The only opportunity to relocate the tower on this property would be to the northwest of the substation.
Why not to the west on the south property line?
We couldn't get 200 feet of distance from anything if we just slid it east to west.
Well, you've got, the way I read the dimension, you've got 160 feet from the west property pin to the center of the pole, and you're telling me there's almost 50 feet. So you'd have pretty close to 200 feet. Would you not?
If
And
you
if that's
took
what the expert is saying, why can't we accommodate that request?
well, if we moved the tower just to the west, it would still be in close proximity to the lines that are just north of the property. See, there's some to the north of the tower and there's some to the east of the tower. And we'd want to distance it 200 feet from either of those. So a western slide wouldn't.
Can you call up
wouldn't
the
do it.
site plan, Patrick?
Yes,
so I
sir.
can see that? So you've got overhead transmission lines running up and down the page on the left-hand side. That would be the east side of the site, correct?
Yes.
Is that the transmission lines that the expert is referring to when he says a 200-foot separation?
Those would be, but he's also referring to the substation itself and distancing the pole, the tower from the substation
Well,
itself.
if this site plan is to scale, then I'm comfortable you're well far enough away from the substation, and if you move it to the west, you could be almost 200 feet, where I think the expert would not have such a problem with a pine tree.
Looks like we could get close there.
Okay, and then you said to the northwest was not an option, which would be the upper left. Why is that? You said it was heavily wooded, but I've never heard that to be an excuse before.
That is just an observation.
So is that a possible location as well?
I would think so.
To accommodate the request of to get them their 200-foot, 160-foot pole, but to also have a camouflage.
I believe it is a potential location.
Okay, very good. Has the HOA responded to the revised plan, back to the original plan with a straight monopole? I wasn't clear on that.
I have not received anything in writing from the HOA. I believe they may have sent someone here tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Patrick at this point? We'll hear from the applicant if they have a presentation. Mr. Payne may straighten me out on this. So.
I'll try my best, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and other members of the Planning Commission, Charlie Payne, the law firm Hersher Fleischer, and we represent the applicant. Just real quickly before I forget it, Mr. Chairman, sliding it left to the west doesn't get us away from the transmission lines. So I think what I'm not going to speak for the county's expert, he can certainly speak for himself. I think what he's saying is whether you move it east or west, 200 feet or up, you're not going to get enough distance away from the transmission lines on the substation site to avoid the issue with the pond pole, which is my understanding.
So the transmission lines you're speaking of running left to right on the
Yes.
sheet? Okay, I got you. Thank you.
So, and just for purposes real quick of relocating it to the northwest, the problem over there is the topography. It steeps pretty quickly down, and there's some wetlands over there. So basically, the only location this pole can be at is where we're proposed it. We've looked at every other location on this site. Mr. Chairman, I do have a PowerPoint, not that Patrick's PowerPoint wasn't informing or exciting, but I thought that I would just add a few other points and reiterate some points. So, and Patrick's going to help me turn these. So as staff had stated, the applicant is Milestone Communications with T-Mobile. The site is tax map parcel 21A 93A, which is currently the Dominion substation. I don't know if any of you have been out there to take a look at that substation. It's a pretty big substation. It also has a microwave monopole out there as well. It requires a special use permit under RU in order to operate a telecommunications tower of 150 feet. As staff had noted, the proposed tower is set back approximately 660 feet from the nearest residence, which is to the south. The surrounding uses are zoned RU, and as I stated, do include the Dominion substation and Salem Fields Community Church, both of which support this project. You'll see in some other slides coming up that this is a heavily wooded area, except for the 100-foot cleared right-of-way that Dominion requires for the transmission lines. You'll see that as well. So the bottom line is this is already a utility footprint. So in our opinion, this is the best place to put yet another utility. The proposed tower is beside, as I stated, the electrical substation. There's an existing microwave communication tower, which we cannot co-locate on. For several reasons. One is not only security concerns being one. As you probably all know, cyber security issues, especially with power companies, is a priority today. It's a very, very big issue with hacking. The Federal Communications Commission also, you hear a lot about RF frequency from folks. Obviously, this is regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, and this proposal will adhere to those requirements. Again, as staff had noted, the tower is designed to have breakpoint technology, which means it will buckle if there is a catastrophic event versus just falling over. It may, if that occurs, it may buckle over our adjoining property owner. We did have to go to the adjoining property owner, Salem Fields Community Church, and ask them to acknowledge and agree to the waiver request, which they did, and they did that, and they also support the project. The tower is also buffered by existing tree line. You'll see that in an upcoming slide. We'll also have an 8-foot-high chain link fence around the perimeter of the tower, which basically would cover where the base equipment is located. The applicant has proposed to replace to plant 21 replacement trees. As staff had noted earlier, we need to remove 18. We're going to replace it with 21, and we'll supplement the existing planting to the northwest with 33 additional trees. As I stated earlier, here's an overview of the site. To the east is the church, to our north is the substation, and to the south is the residential development. You'll see it's very heavily wooded in that area. The microwave tower is just to our north, about 300 feet. You'll see that the clearing area there, the 100-foot wide right-of-way, runs north and south. Purposes of the comprehensive plan, this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It is located outside the primary development boundary. The proposed use is obviously encouraged under policy A2 to encourage telecommunication infrastructure. Obviously, here we go. Why is it needed? Thank you, Patrick. You're ahead of me. You want to go back to the other slide? I'm sorry. All right, next slide. Sorry. Why is it needed? Next slide, Patrick. Again, T-Mobile has identified a coverage gap. I'm going to have Tim Dwyer from T-Mobile to explain our propagation analysis for that purpose. The proposed 100-foot monopole, we believe, will address that coverage gap, and of course, we can co-locate a total of 4 additional carriers Next slide, please. And we all know why this is in demand. 39% of American homes have only wireless telephone, which is amazing to me. 1 of every 6 American homes receives or almost all calls from a wireless telephone. 60% of adults 25 to 29 use only wireless telephones, and 70% of 911 calls utilize a cell phone for that purpose. And here are the devices. It's my understanding that on average every American has about 3 of these. I think my household exceeds that by 3. Propagation analysis. Tim, if you could come up and just go through this and explain to the Planning Commission your analysis for that purpose.
Good evening. For the record, Timothy Dwyer, representing T-Mobile. I'll give you a brief overview of why this site is needed. When you look at these, this is the proposed coverage. And when you look at the dark green area, the coverage it will provide will be in-building coverage, meaning that if you're in your house, the signal can actually go through your walls and things like that in commercial as well as residential properties. As you come out, you see the lighter green. That's still good coverage, and then obviously the light green is just coverage in general. Why we need this site for T-Mobile specifically is there is a monopole about 1.5 miles as a crow flies to the northwest. I believe it's at 7510 Old Plank Road. That site is heavily congested given the proximity to Route 3 and all the residential homes to the south and east and west there. T-Mobile identified this gap in their customer base. They need this site to fill it. And obviously this site will help with all the residential areas as well as the Route 3 area. Some of the alternative sites we looked at, is there another slide?
Yep, next slide.
Next slide. Great. One more slide. Great. We looked at, when T-Mobile came to this area, we looked at a few options prior to coming to Milestone. First was the transmission line itself. As you know, you can co-locate on existing transmission towers. However, the closest tower is occupied by Verizon Wireless. I think it's just south of Nye River Landing Road. Any farther down, it's not good for T-Mobile. It's too far away from the coverage gap that they need. And those towers aren't structurally capable to hold 2 carriers. We also, when we approached Milestone, we looked at, obviously, county-owned property first. We looked at the Smith Station Elementary School and Freedom Middle School. Again, both properties are too far away. They're about 3/4 of a mile south from where this site is, or as a crow flies. And that, again, we're trying to relieve pressure from the north. And as we go farther south and farther east, it just doesn't work for T-Mobile's coverage gaps. So I'll answer any questions if you have any specific to T-Mobile coverage, or otherwise I'll let Charlie resume. Okay.
I had a quick question on the engineering side of things. How does where do the lines go, right? Gets to the antenna, goes down. How does that get into the system? Like, are there existing lines that it's utilizing, or?
It connects to the actual landline, telephone line. So to give you a layman's perspective, and that's what I'm going to give you because I'm not an engineer. You make a call, the signal goes to the closest monopole or antenna, goes down. The monopole itself is connected to a landline system that we use on our home phones if we have them. That finds the closest monopole or antenna, whoever you're calling, back up and out. So it's basic, but right now, most monopoles or antennas are connected to the landline system. In the future, you might see that become what's called voice over LTE, where they'll actually, a call-to-call will be over the internet. But that technology is not quite there yet, and we use the internet for so many things that doing calls would probably overload the system. But for now, it's landline.
And where's that landline connection? Is it on site already, or?
Yeah, there's usually a telco hookup when they build the site. They go to whoever the closest carrier is, and they do a telco hookup.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tim. I just thought that analysis would be helpful because there's always a question if we looked at alternative sites. Next slide. You've seen this. Staff presented this. This is the location of the tower just south of the substation. And this is what the ground equipment shelter generally will look like with the fencing. Community outreach. Obviously, we had a community meeting. We had to go out 2,000 feet from the site. So here's the various locations that we reached out to. 2 folks did attend the community meeting. I believe maybe one of those did contact Patrick today. And as I stated earlier, support from Dominion Power and Salem Fields Community Church. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments from John? Okay, thank you. At this point, we will open up to the public for comment. Same rules apply.
I do have a sign-up sheet.
Okay, call them off.
Jean Rice, followed by Rebecca Tolson.
Good evening. I am a resident of Niagara Landing, but I'm not here representing the HOA. I just here on my own recognizance. I did talk to the HOA president earlier today, and he did say that he had received the letter notification that the camouflaging wasn't appropriate, and it was my understanding from him that he thought the Planning Commission was looking into alternatives, and so that may be why he has not received or sent any kind of reply to you all on that. My own two objections to this, and not really strong objections, and at least from saying no, is that first of all, if you look at the diagram for this system and its proximity to the power lines, even if it's designed to fold on itself, it's so close to them that if it does so, particularly the lines to the north, it's likely to take them out. And so you have to kind of look at the fact that any structural failure on that tower is likely to cause interruptions in power. I don't see it can be unavoidable. If you look at the diagram, you see that those power lines are well within the 88-foot radius that they postulated. The second objection I have is that I understand that the Planning Commission wants to try to minimize community impact, and part of that is to work for co-location of assets in this regard whenever they can, and that doesn't seem to be the case here. I understand that we can't put the cell phone tower where the current power telecommunications pole is, but why can't that power telecommunications antenna be moved to the new tower once it's constructed, so we're not creating the Chancellor Antenna Farm? That would seem to me to minimize, at least you'd still only have one pole sticking in the air, and you'd minimize the community impact just that little bit, even if you can't move it or put some kind of pine cone branches on it or something. Those are my two objections or two comments. That's all I have. Thank you.
Rebecca Tolson, followed by Peter Getz.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Tolson, 7306 Nye River Landing. I do have that Verizon communications on my property leased, and my objection is 17 years ago I purchased a Nye River Landing. I accepted that I'm gonna live on a power line, and I actually live, right where the lines are, probably one of the closest neighbors on those power lines. But my neighbor across the street at 7303, and she's not here, they're out of town, but over 2 years they've tried to sell their property. And every time someone comes to look at the property, they mention those power lines as the reason why they're not going to consider buying it. And I'm hoping that we don't have to have another vertical pole in our neighborhood to see, because that's just going to be another objection from people trying to buy in our community. It's going to lower our property values. So that's a big objection, and they're in their 70s, so they need to move out of that big house and get a smaller house.
Peter Getz, followed by Jason Heine.
Good evening, Peter Getz, 6112 Thayer Street, Cortland District, here on behalf of Salem Fields Community Church. And just real briefly, we all use our cell phones. We all want them to work. We all want robust coverage. And I think we all want pretty good competition among the major carriers to keep price down and coverage. And so for any number of reasons, Salem Fields recognizes that cell phones are what everybody has these days. We need them. That area is fairly utility-centric right now with the substation, with the existing tower. And so this is an appropriate place for it. Everybody's view shed is affected anytime a tower goes up anywhere. But the thought that we're not going to have towers and cell phones is probably not realistic either. And so for a number of reasons, Salem Fields is comfortable with the tower placement there. We do acknowledge that it has the potential to impact our property were it to fold over onto church property. We have a large amount of area there, and we're okay with that. So that's where the church stands relative to this. We are the landowner that is the most impacted, certainly from a physical perspective. obviously other people are affected by the view. Thank you.
Jason Heine, followed by Dawn and Chris Burke.
Jason Heine, 7209 Nye River Landing, also a member of the Nye River Landing Homeowners Association on the Board of Directors. And of course, our position has always been that if the tower is going to be there, we would like to have it camouflaged as a tree. And we're going to stick with that. I think it probably could work on the northwest corner. I'm sure it would be more expensive, but this thing's going to be there for a long, long time. And I would just ask the Planning Commission to consider that, please.
Dawn and Chris Burke? No? Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else wishes to speak? If the applicant wishes to respond.
Mr. Chairman and other members of the Planning Commission, again, Charlie Payne's law firm, Hersher Fleischer, represent the applicant. And as always, we always appreciate comments from the public and their concerns. And just so you know, certainly from the folks from Nye River Landing, the pond pole concept, we did propose it. We actually submitted drawings and designs for the pond pole concept. It was after the fact when staff and a consultant came back to us with the concerns about the pond pole and the issues about it being close to the substation and to the transmission line. So I want the community to know that we did propose that, and I'm not putting it on the county, but I'm just saying I don't want them to think that somehow we're trying to save money because we did propose that option. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work within this utility footprint. Now, in relocating, and I've heard folks say again, to relocate it to the northwest, we looked at that extensively, and again, we'd already proposed the pine poles, so we did look to relocate it there. It's just a topography challenge. It's just not going to work. So again, this is the best location within this utility footprint to locate this pine pole. In regards to the use of the other tower that Dominion owns, the microwave tower, that was our first option, we thought, and Dominion obviously came back and thought that would be a security problem. Obviously not only is communication essential to Spotsylvania County, but so is electricity and having electricity. So Dominion took the position that it was too much of a risk for us to co-locate on their tower. And they provided that letter to the county as well as to their position. In regards...
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we can talk afterwards if you like. In regards to the tower falling onto the transmission lines, obviously the owner of those transmission lines, being Dominion, is comfortable with our location there and comfortable with our engineering and the structure of the pole, that would be a very highly unlikely event. However, we can actually design the tower if a catastrophic event occurs to buckle south, not onto the transmission line. So we can actually do that if that's something that the Planning Commission would like for us to entertain. I think I covered all the questions that were raised by the community. And we've got our engineer here. We've got T-Mobile here. We've got a representative from the applicant here. So if you have any questions that I can't answer, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer those questions.
Perhaps you can help me out with something. Are there other materials that can be used to camouflage this thing that would satisfy the neighbors here and keep it in its proposed location?
You mean other than a pine pole look?
Well, either to use different materials to get a pine pole look or something that would be suitable to the...
Typically, the option is to paint it so that it blends in with the surrounding areas, the pole itself. Any sort of additional attachments to that pole, I think we're going to run into the same issue regarding the public safety concerns.
Yeah, and a 156-foot pole next to a power line is less of a concern than the materials used to make it a camouflage.
Well, there's already one there, obviously, that Dominion put in place.
Yeah.
And then obviously Dominion, who I would think would be the keeper and the main concerning party as to whether or not that pole would be a hazard to the substation, is obviously working with us to put the pole in place. So I think that they feel comfortable with the pole being there.
Any other questions or comments at this time?
And as I stated, we can actually engineer it so that it does fall away from the transmission line.
Yeah, if I may, I have a question. Well, how did Dominion feel about the pine tree?
Dominion initially did not have concerns, but after the concerns were raised by staff, Dominion agreed with staff that that would be a problem.
Do we have a copy in our package of the experts report? I'm looking for it. Can you point me to that?
Yes, sir. In your, do you have an actual packet or do you have an electronic packet?
I have the actual packet.
Then I
have
believe
it.
it should be at the front of that packet, and its cover page looks like,
I have addendum 1.
okay, that's the most recent version. And then the other document that looks very similar to that is his original report. And he's also here.
Beautiful.
And Dominion has concurred with his analysis, I believe. Is that right, Patrick, if my memory serves me?
Yes, we received that letter.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, very
Thank you,
well.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you. Just to address a couple of comments, I too share the safety concerns with this, and I am going to make a motion to approve this because I strongly feel that it's in the best interest of the citizens that we have infrastructure for cell phone use, not only for the items pointed out in the comments tonight, but also for life safety issues. The technology that our fire department and police department are using with cell phones today is critically important for quick response times, but also the educational opportunities with schools and students and so forth using this technology for education purposes, along with all the other reasons that we can think of. And also, one comment in regards to property values. I hear that a lot, and I have yet to receive any data or find any data that suggests that a cell phone service or tower has a negative impact on property values. In fact, I'm finding the opposite to be true, that because it is ingrained in our society today, that it is a wanted commodity. So again, I would ask if anybody has any data in that regard, I would love to see it. So with that, I am going to make a motion to approve with the conditions noted and the added condition about the safety feature and making sure that this falls the right way should that happen. Hopefully my motion is clear. And with that, I will take a second on that.
Second.
Mr. Thompson?
Nay.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Bullock?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to CA 17-0008.
Vehicles, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. The next item is a code amendment related to vehicle sales. Had a couple of discussions with the Planning Commission over the last few months about this topic, and this was initiated and authorized for public hearing by the Board of Supervisors back in August. The proposal before you does a number of things. It changes several sections of the code. The first item is related to definitions, and the definitions proposed to be changed include related to the vehicle sale, rental, and ancillary service establishment. That's the current definition that's in our ordinance, and there's just the one single definition. What we're proposing with this code amendment is to create a definition that has large scale at the end and then a separate one that says small scale. And large scale is for parcels that are 2 acres or greater, and small scale are for less than 2 acres. And then as part of that, we are adding a new definition for recreational vehicle. It's just something we realized we didn't have a definition for, and it's referenced in both of the vehicle sale definitions, so we are adding that definition. So the proposal before you is to permit the large-scale vehicle sale, rental, and ancillary service establishments, and to require a special use permit for the small-scale ones. So trying to target the vehicle sales that are going on to the smaller parcels in our Commercial 3, Industrial 1, and Industrial 2 zoning districts. The proposal also includes creating standards of review related to the small-scale special use application. What we would request as part of that application is a vehicle delivery statement that looks at how the stock vehicles are delivered onto the lot. That's to address some of the issues that have arisen related to vehicles being offloaded on the street and driven onto lots for sale. The next one is that there be a minimum of 10 paved vehicle stock spaces. The state of Virginia actually requires that when used car sales or car sales in general are established, that they have a minimum of 10 spaces. So we're just adhering to their minimum there. The certified parking plan is the next item. What we're looking at is, do we have safe ingress and egress for both car delivery and for customers? A loading zone that's off the public roadway, that we have sufficient parking spaces for both the display vehicles but also for customers and employees. And again, indicating how that delivery will access the lot and the loading space, and also allowing for, if dealerships share one lot, that the parking plan demonstrates that the parking requirements are met for the multiple dealerships that are utilizing one single lot. The implementation of this ordinance, it does allow for a transition. The ordinance would not go into effect until the board adopts it, and that means that any application that's in process prior to board adoption would continue through the process as it has been. But once the board adopts the code amendment, any new application would have to adhere to the new code standards. One of the issues that was raised and discussed at the Planning Commission was the non-conforming nature of some of these properties. These are the properties that are commercially zoned, that may have originally been used as a residence but then converted to an office use perhaps later. They are able to, as a permitted use, function in that way. And right now they're able to function as a used car lot. So there is that 2-year provision in our code that allows a used car lot to vacate one of these non-conforming lots. And if another used car lot moves in within 2 years, it is permitted. It would not fall under this special use permit provision. We researched that, and the Code of Virginia allows the county to adopt a 2-year reestablishment clause. It's not a requirement of the Code of Virginia, so that's something that the county has decided to do. So the county could change that code section, and that would affect every non-conforming use, though. You can't target one particular use over another particular use. So it would be a blanket elimination of the 2-year, or perhaps reduce it to 1 year, or 6 months would be another option, shorten the length of time. But just to let you know that that's something that is completely separate from this code amendment, but it was a topic of discussion during the work sessions with the Planning Commission and the board. Just a concern about how do we transition properties over a little faster to ensure that they're safe properties for these businesses to function on, and that the property has sufficient room to accommodate the business so that they're good neighbors to their neighboring properties. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Any questions? Or?
So the definition of the size, a 2 acres or greater cutoff.
Mm-hmm.
If an applicant were to come and create an establishment for a dealership and had 4 1.5 acre lots side by side by side by side, is that considered, how does that work?
Right. It's not based purely on parcel size. Someone could consolidate several parcels and have a property that is 3 acres, and therefore they would be a permitted use.
Excuse me, but would that entail actually combining them with one deed instead of 2 deeds to properties?
Well, it would be a plat. They would need to consolidate it with a plat.
With a plat.
Eliminate those parcel lines that are in between.
But it would still be 2 deeded properties.
Well, they would, well, when they consolidate it, they would probably go ahead
They would-
and consolidate it by
okay.
deed as well,
Thank you.
yes. We handle the plat part of it, and the deed part's handled privately.
Any other questions, comments? Any comment from the public at this point? Very well. Any other questions or comments? I will take a motion on this application.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Bullock?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Very well.
And thank you so much. The community loves you.
Wanda, are you going to, is there anything else that we have this evening?
We have a brief update on the
The
solar
solar.
topic. All right. So after the public hearing at the last meeting, just wanted to briefly talk about the intent of the solar ordinance. There are a couple of citizens that spoke, and so we wanted to come back and sort of reorient everybody in terms of what is the intent of this ordinance in preparation of coming back to the next meeting for the vote on that solar ordinance. The intent is to allow solar facilities with a special use in the agricultural 2 and the agricultural 3 zoning. And what I mean by a solar facility, I'm talking about what you see on your screen here. You might call it a solar farm. It's where solar is being captured, the sun is being captured, it's converting into energy, and it is being distributed for use by somebody else down the line.
It's a freestanding commercial business.
Freestanding
Thank you.
commercial business. What we are not trying to capture or regulate in this ordinance is, for example, an individual property owner installs some solar panels to generate electricity to power something on their farm, to power their business, offset costs related to their home electricity. So all of these are examples of what the ordinance does not regulate. And we're looking at the definition, just trying to add a few words to it to make that abundantly clear. I think that just a slight tweak to that definition will make it abundantly clear that this is not what's being regulated. And so that's what we'll bring back to you at the next meeting is a revision to the definition. The special use itself, the special use, I just wanted to review with you the purpose of a special use. Special uses are generally compatible with other land uses, but they have unique characteristics or potential impacts that require individual consideration at that particular location. So the reason that we're recommending that these be considered as a special use permit and not allowing for them as a by right use is because we feel that this type of use at a larger scale really fits in this definition. And it's something new to the county as well, and so we don't really know how this will play out, what the impacts will be on the neighborhoods, how people will react to them. So we'd like to consider each one individually at its particular location and be able to condition buffers as appropriate to that location and other mitigating factors. Just to give you an example of how much of the county is A2 and A3 zoned, I just clipped the zoning map, the overall zoning map of the county. So you can see here that there's not a lot of A2 land. It's mainly up in this area. It's the lighter green color. And then the Kelly green color, that is our agricultural 3 zoning. So there is a large area that's agriculturally 3 zoned. And both of these, there are agricultural zoned areas. They're rural in character. We're trying to protect and enhance the agricultural economy of the county. You know, we hear a lot from people, they move to these areas because they want to be in the country and enjoy the country. I will say, I don't know if the gentleman is here yet this evening, but we did get an inquiry from somebody today that said that they've been approached by a company looking at property that is rural zoned. We didn't include rural zoning in that code amendment that went to public hearing. So that area, just to give you an idea of what area that is, it is the lightest green area here that is all through here. So it would require an amendment to the ordinance if the county should decide to go in the direction of including rural zoning within this provision. And what I've done on this next slide, I've taken just a clip of our zoning map down in this general area, just to look at, the example was given at the last meeting of allowing these as a permitted use on 200 acres or less. So I just was poking around and I found a parcel that was 173 acres, just to give an example of, well, here's a larger parcel, but look at all of these smaller properties around it that would be affected. And that's why we're looking at this as a special use, because even when you get into your rural areas, we do have a lot of residential neighborhoods or individual residential uses that will be bordering on these properties, and feel that each of these deserves individual consideration at its particular location to determine what is the best way to provide mitigation for it. So that's why staff is recommending that this continue as a special use regardless of the parcel size. You know, you could even look down and say, okay, well, what if we went down to, 20 acres or something like that? So then you've got this parcel and you still do have neighbors. So that is the reason that we're recommending it be considered as a special use rather than as permitted.
Mr. Chairman, a special use, and you got just a small acres, all right? You got 2-3 acres. How much is a special use going to cost them to come in and get?
Right. Well, one thing I do want to emphasize is because we are talking about the corporate entity. One of the questions that I am looking into is, what is the smallest area that a corporate entity is going to lease to provide, to put put solar on, where it's going to be worthwhile to them financially? Is it 10 acres? Is it 2 acres? Is it something larger? But a special use permit is approximately $7,300. And that pays for all of the staff time, review, preparation of reports, presenting to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. The advertising that we are required to do alone costs almost $1,000. So the way that our fee structure is scheduled, it's basically a user fee. If you wish to operate a solar facility on your property, there is a special use permit and a user fee that basically pays for the time and overhead to process that application.
You brought up something I think would be beneficial to us, is what size acreage would a commercial venture actually be looking at? Yes. I'm sure it isn't 3 acres. It's just takes so much of this stuff to make any money.
Yes, I suspect that as well. So that is one question that we're asking around to try to track down a good answer to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On the special use permit, if, let's say somebody had 200 acres and wanted to do it, would the fee be the same as somebody that had maybe 3,000 acres?
Yes, for the special use is a set fee.
Thank you.
For 3 acres, you'd have to pay $7,000 for a special use permit. Did Patrick talk to the people that spoke?
We have a couple here tonight, I think, spoke
Yes.
at the last.
Patrick did speak with,
Have a couple here.
Yeah, I believe they spoke at the last meeting, and your concern was, I think you have a farm or an operation where you'd like to produce solar electricity. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Can we speak? Can you
Yeah,
speak?
yeah, I'd like to have him, if you want to come on up.
Come on, Dr. Robertson.
Victoria, I don't think that's a problem, right?
One of you, both of you, come on.
$47.38. And after speaking to Patrick and listening to Wanda's presentation tonight, I think it's abundantly clear that we won't be impacted. Our solar panels will power our well, also our, deer fencing. So it's just for our own farm consumption that we're using our solar panels.
So you're using your own solar panels?
Right.
And
We're
they
not
don't have to
selling
have
electricity
anything-
back to
They don't have
anybody.
to have a special use permit.
No, I don't think we'll need one.
Is that right, Ron?
that's correct. They do not need one.
Okay.
And that's abundantly clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
but.
that's it, but they're gonna get
whenever-
mixed up,
Yes,
because they're
but
not gonna
whenever you
know.
introduce a new regulation or requirement, then sometimes you fall into these unintended
Absolutely.
consequences. So I'm glad for the clarification, thank you. Any other questions? Do you require any action tonight?
No, we just wanted to give you an update before we came back to the next meeting. So what we'll do at the next meeting is we'll have an amended definition, and that will probably be the only change.
Can I ask one other question? It just strikes me looking at your photograph you had of a solar farm. Is it feasible or even legal to say within an A3 zone that, based on the comp plan, we will have just this area within an A3 for solar development? Is that even a?
To
You know,
target it
Yeah.
within the comp plan, you're saying, to
Or,
create
yeah, as
a-
part of the comp plan, to create an area within an A3 where we allow solar farms of this size.
I mean, the comprehensive plan is a guide, so certainly we could come up with standards related to that and target certain areas and identify areas where they're encouraged. But if we're looking, once we get to the zoning part of it, A3 zoning is A3 zoning.
A3 zoning, so you
So
can't-
you've got to
okay.
treat all A3 zoning the same.
Very well. Any other questions, Mr. Thompson? Are you ready to go?
Well, I have an issue. I feel that a mixed-use ordinance is being abused certain times, and I'd like to have a review on that. I know there's several components involved in a mixed use, and it seems that a lot of these guys are using the mixed-use ordinance to build just one type of structure or one type of venture. And I think the purpose of it, the intent of it, the way I understood it when we voted on it, it would bypass continued permissions to do different things on the same property. I had it in my mind that a mixed use would be the guy's gonna build houses and he's gonna have some mall strip things or maybe something else going on, but a whole lot of times these people are coming to us and they're only building one type of venture. And I think it's being abused. Maybe we should review it and request to be used mixed use, you have to have at least 2 or maybe 3 of the components involved in mixed use have to be built.
We'll go ahead and put that on our list.
Thank you.
That would fall under new business?
New business.
Okay, thank you. Any other new business? Any other public comment unrelated to anything we've heard tonight?
The gentleman who is here is Mr. Peter Getz, who does have some comments about a topic that was not discussed in any public hearing tonight, particularly the solar topic we were just on.
Very well.
Good evening, Peter Getz, Thayer Street, Cortland District. I'm a little late to the solar conversation only because was just approached in the last few days by a solar company, large national solar company that partners with utilities, in this case Dominion Energy, to find suitable property to develop solar, small solar farms in partnership with Dominion. And so it caused me to have a conversation with Patrick earlier today and then realized this was happening. Wanda had a slide that showed the rural area, and there's a fair amount of the county that's rural. And going to one of the questions you all talked about just a few minutes ago, they were looking at 10 acres, which would be about 2 megawatts, as commercially viable. And there's a lot of parcels in the rural area, a lot of farms, a lot of land out there that would be appropriate, would be a fairly straightforward use. I strongly encourage you to consider putting rural in this ordinance. I think having a special use permit provides all the protections in the world. I've sat through a few of those, in this room over the last few months, and there's lots of control and protections for the county around special use permits. But given that really the industry and the economics should drive how big, or how small, I'd much rather it be available to the landowners in the county. And if it's viable, it's viable. If it's economic, it's economic. And that will make the decisions, but at least have it on the table for them in terms of a special use opportunity. So I strongly encourage you to look to bring that in under the same umbrella. Keep the special use, no concerns there. And if somebody says I can do 5 acres or I can do 10 acres, I think you let them do it. You figure out within a special use buffering, whatever is appropriate for surrounding landowners, et cetera. But solar, it's a pretty low impact deal. It's not a 150-foot monopole. It's not a 200-foot, microwave tower on a substation, right? So I just strongly encourage you to take another look at not shrinking the amount of real estate available within the county unnecessarily. Thank you.
So we'll take that under advisement. I think it's a good comment. Would that require another?
It would. We could wrap it into this current endeavor by having another public hearing, advertising it to include rural. The change to the ordinance is very simple.
Right.
To include the rural. We'd need to re-advertise, have another public hearing that includes rural as a component. Or it could travel through separately later as its own separate amendment, which probably would be not preferable since we're just now considering this and it's not too late to wrap it in.
Right. Would you take that under advisement and comment back to us and see what a good path forward is on that? Because I think he's correct. Looking at the area we have of rural zoned, I would think it'd be appropriate to.
Could I consult with Alexandra for just a moment, because it would be timely to take the action this evening if the Planning Commission wished to include it. So let me. Mr. Chairman, if the Planning Commission would like to include rural in the ordinance, what we would need is a motion and vote from the Planning Commission directing staff to include rural in that ordinance. And we would not have time to do the advertisement and bring it back on October the 4th, but we could bring it back on October the 18th. And then it would be a new public hearing.
It would be a new public hearing. And it would be appropriate, can I ask the opinion of the other planning commissioners? Do we do that? Can I ask this as part of a discussion, or should I go to a motion first and then part of the discussion?
I believe this can be part of your discussion about this.
Okay, and I would, to me, I'm in favor of this because I think it's appropriate given the amount of area we have in rural, but I would ask the other commissioners if this is something we want to do. Any comment on that? Anybody?
I'd want to see one thing or get feedback, or if we have any information on, because something kind of popped in my mind here. The material that's used is very reflective. Has there been any issues with, we start getting rural, I think we start getting closer to Shannon Airport. Is there any issues with vision potentially reflecting off of, a massive solar panel sitting there and then causing an issue for flight, a pilot or something along those lines? Just kind of curious about that, because I believe if I remember that map, we start getting close to our RU starts wrapping around over there. Or it may already be agriculture, so it doesn't really matter, but it's that popped into my mind just now.
We have some provisions in the ordinance, the way it's currently drafted, to address that.
May
I did. He remains an advocate of having these approved by right if they're about 200 acres or less.
Without a special use permit.
Without a special use permit.
Dr. Robinson, say something?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I was just going to go to him. Yes, sir. Well, that's another great point. And there's a lot of information I think we still need. But I'm inclined at this point to bring in make a motion here to add rural districts into the conversation, and then come back with the revised public hearing if that's what the Planning Commission wishes to do.
I second it.
What you all like, Mr. Smith? You looked into that?
If the deer hunting improves, he's all over it, but, yeah. All right, so we have a motion on the table to bring it into the consideration, and.
May I add, make sure that we look into the wildlife factor?
Of course, you could add that into the motion, that we look into the wildlife.
We don't need that
I'm not
as part of the
exactly sure what we would.
Well, generally, these are fenced, so, you'll have basically a fenced compound where, deer will not be able to travel through their routes that they used to be able to travel through. So yes, it will impact wildlife, just simply because of the fenced nature of them.
So the subdivisions, but we never asked a question about that.
I know, yeah. All right, very well. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second.
I second.
Very well. Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Mr. Mendina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Bullock?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, Wanda.
So we will bring this back then on October the 18th rather than on the 4th.
Perfect, thank you. Any other new business? Hearing none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I will take a aye vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.